An Argentine wonderland built in a time of terror.
Everything had to be bigger and better. This place was a statement of their political will.
An incongruous Turkish castle, part of a fantastical vision.
Climbing the spiral staircase, you catch glimpses of something you can't quite believe.
A woodland homestead in Finland conceived by an eccentric visionary.
This place was a magnet for Finland's artistic elite in its day.
And an aging North Sea complex that found a surprising savior.
Something huge was needed, and it arrived in the shape of a helicopter.
Decaying relics. Ruins of lost worlds. Sites haunted by the past. Their secrets waiting to be revealed. A 120 miles east of Istanbul, Turkey, is a fantastical structure.
It's almost like a fairy tale. It's got turrets and very much the old castle feel to it.
You half expect to see Rapunzel letting down her hair from one of the balconies.
This building looks like it would be more at home in Renaissance France or Disneyland than rural Turkey.
Beyond its storybook facade, the illusion is shattered.
The walls and floors are bare concrete and blockwork. It's just a shell.
The plumbing's exposed, and the floor is covered with layers of dust and rubble.
This structure, though, is far from alone.
Climbing the spiral staircase inside the tower, you catch glimpses of something you can't quite believe.
When you kind of zoom out and look at it from above, it just goes on, and it's just pretty unbelievable, the vastness of it all.
Tower after tower and building after building, mini mansion after mini mansion, it's just really surreal.
Why build so many of these crazy structures? Where did it all go wrong?
Tolga Özbek was one of those who dreamt up this mind-bending project.
Biz Mudurnu ilçesinde sıra dışı bir şehir kurmak istedik. Bütün dünyanın dikkatini çeken bir yapı oluşturmak istedik.
The idyllic surroundings provided more than just a desirable view.
The region is famous for its natural beauty and its thermal springs, which have been in use as far back as Roman times.
It was these thermal springs that first drew the attention of the company behind this massive project.
This is Burj Al Babas. It was to be as unique in design as it was in scale.
Victorian mimarisinden esinlendik. Türkiye'deki Galata Kulesi ve Kız Kulesi esintileriyle beraber.
Much like how the famous Disney castle logo was inspired and influenced by grand European castles, you feel like the architects may have taken a few liberties.
They were not replicas. They took fantastical ideas and made it their own.
What they were selling here was, for a price, your own slice of a fantasy world.
This design wasn't just an architectural experiment, but a sales tactic.
Tasarımda öncelikle Victorian mimarisi ele alındı. Bununla beraber bizim Türkiye'deki yabancıların çok dikkatini çeken Galata Kulesi ile birleştirilerek bir mimari oluşturuldu. Bu yapılara karar verilmeden önce 15-20 ayrı bir model çıkartılmıştı.
The target market for this development was people from the Middle East, from Kuwait, from Saudi Arabia, from UAE. They're going to love the trees, the mountains, and they're going to appreciate the fantasy that has been set up in this development.
It seems to have worked.
Ve başladığımız yerde bizim beklediğimizin çok üstünde bir talep oldu. Değişik bir projeydi. Çok ilgi gördü.
Construction began in 2014 with a $200 million budget.
The asking price for each of the chateaus would be between $400,000 and $500,000.
But there was a problem.
Most of the work we can see today hadn't even started when the plots were being sold.
The company had to show their clients what they were spending their money on.
They produced a catalogue with detailed 3D renderings of what each home looked like when finished. And these mock-ups dripped with luxury.
Buyers were promised homes fitted out with all the mod cons.
Villaların içerisinde termal su var. Banyolarda ve jacuzzi'lerde termal su kullanabiliyorsunuz.
The pièce de résistance, though, was the roof balcony, which offered views out over the entire development.
In addition to hundreds of fantastical homes, there would be plenty of amenities on offer.
This wasn't just an area with these castles. This was to be a whole development that really felt like a resort.
Burası girişte resepsiyon kısmımız, müşteri kabul kısmımız. Zaten yan taraflarda da resepsiyonlar, restoranlar ve fast food'larımız var. Fransız mutfağı ve Türk mutfağına özel restoranlarımız olacak.
The region's famed thermal waters would be the main draw to this massive structure.
Ilık havuzlarımız ve termal havuzlarımız var. Jacuzzilerimiz, şok havuzlarımız, buhar banyosu, buhar odalarımız, saunalarımız.
Inside, the large circular pools were to be surrounded by marble pillars, decorated with gilded scrolls, and views straight up to these huge domes suspended above.
The architecture of the main complex would be no less impressive than the rest of the development.
We're going to have nods to the U.S. Capitol, to St. Paul's Cathedral, just really very much over the top.
By 2017, construction was gathering pace. But Burj Al Babas would soon go from fantasy to nightmare.
The Turkish economy was tanking, and plummeting oil prices were hitting the developers' target market, the oil-rich Gulf clients, hard in the wallet. Sales were beginning to dry up, but the building work pressed on.
By 2018, the company was in serious trouble. They had only sold 350 out of the 587 chateaus they had built.
The construction company declared bankruptcy, and when they were no longer able to pay their workers, everything stopped.
By 2020, the company had cleared its debts and planned to restart construction. But hit by the COVID-19 pandemic and bad weather, the project was further delayed. Today, Mr. Tolga's organization believes that work will begin again soon.
Ve tekrar işte yabancı yatırımcılar temin ederek ve yabancı yatırımcıların iştiraklarını sağlayarak önümüzdeki aylarda inşaatına başlayarak 2023'ün sonlarına doğru açmayı düşünüyoruz. 2024'te de tamamen tüm aktiviteleriyle beraber devreye almış olmayı düşünüyoruz.
They now want it to be even bigger and better than what was originally planned, There'll be 6 man-made lakes, a horse riding area, and even cable cars and a monorail.
Whilst to some these plans are highly ambitious, to others they are fantasy. But with international interest reigniting, perhaps Burj Al Babas is closer to reality than it might appear.
With 78% of the chateaus partially finished, it wouldn't take much to get the rest of the project completed as long as the money is there.
They have a new investor. They're optimistically moving forward.
Bundan çok mutlu olacağız. Emeklerimizin karşılığını alacağız. Ve bu çılgın projenin bitmiş olduğunu görmekten mutlu olacağız.
In a suburb of Buenos Aires, Argentina, are the twisted remains of an ambitious vision.
There's this huge area of parkland.
And in the middle is this giant tower, which looks like a sword that's been plunged into the earth.
Hidden amongst the greenery are the remnants of a vast and strange infrastructure.
There are unusual buildings, whimsical, fanciful buildings.
There's a giant place that looks like an abandoned Parthenon theater. There's even a giant model of a man lying down on the floor.
Abandoned trains, carcasses of rides, and the twisted steel of roller coaster tracks leaves you in no doubt that this was once a theme park.
It was born into an era of upheaval.
These monumental, rusted skeletons are the remains of a controversial vision.
This bold vision, though, becomes mired in corruption, and then it ends in a tragic accident.
Fernando Beradiclian has worked here since he was 19 years old.
Y para mí es el mejor trabajo que tuve, y que estuvo más feliz. Algo que donde hice amistades, donde conocí a mi esposa.
These are the remains of Interama, a vast theme park that offered something for everyone.
Había, digamos, 3 montañas rusas grandes, después había fuentes, aguas musicales, después, bueno, autos chocadores, autos de carrera. Era un mundo, el mundo ideal, era Disney en Lugano.
In stark contrast to the joy and wonder Fernando remembers here, Interama began life in a moment of national crisis.
In 1976, there was a particularly noteworthy coup that threw out the government of Isabel Perón. A junta of military leaders took over.
The National Congress was shut down, censorship was ramped up, trade unions were banned, and the entire national government was brought under military control.
With the new regime came a man determined to make his mark on the city.
The junta appointed a man named Osvaldo Cacciatore as mayor of Buenos Aires. Cacciatore had this motto, si lo quiero, lo haga, means if I want it, I do it. If he wanted to bulldoze a neighborhood and build some big project, he just went ahead and did it.
In 1977, the mayor put out a call for companies to bid on building the amusement park.
The vision was to create an Argentine Disney World, capable of receiving 100,000 visitors every day.
But from the very start, there were allegations of dodgy dealings.
Conveniently, the company that won the bid was stuffed full of members of the new military government. It was all pretty cozy.
The groundworks began in late 1978. Omar Vasquez was soon brought in to oversee the project.
Vine acá, última semana del 79. Había mucha gente, muchos contratistas, 700, 800 contratistas tenía en ese momento, a la mitad de la obra.
By the early 1980s, work was progressing quickly. But Cacciatore had exacting standards.
He supposedly took one look at the ticket offices and felt that they were too small, so he ordered them to be rebuilt, this time bigger than Disney's.
For those in power, Interrama couldn't be finished soon enough.
Un encuentro acá, 1 o 2 veces que lo vi en la municipalidad, y la vez que vino estarían en 150 metros de altura la torre y me hizo subir atrás de él y llegó arriba y me dijo, bueno, veo que si no terminas la torre para fin de año te cuelgo de la antena.
It has been suggested that there was more than just ambition behind the need for speed.
The country's military dictator, Lieutenant General Galtieri, thought it would be a good time to start a war. He sent forces out to reclaim this wind-swept group of islands, which in Argentina are known as the Malvinas, but the British and much of the rest of the world knew as the Falkland Islands. And this was British territory. The British were willing to fight for it, and it kicked off this short, very nasty war.
It's said that the military government decided to open this park in a quick manner so they could just kind of distract people from the absolutely disastrous Falklands War.
We still talk about how the Roman emperors, when things weren't going so well, would give the public bread and circuses, cheap entertainment to take their minds off of bad economic conditions.
On the 21st of September 1982, just a few months after the conclusion of the war, the park opened.
They had a lot of stuff that was pretty cutting edge for any amusement park, much less one in a country that was suffering economic difficulties and defeat.
But of the promised attractions, many weren't finished in time. And just over a year after Interrama had opened, the Argentine people went to the polls. Democracy was finally restored.
This was a great moment for the country, but it spelled trouble for the park.
When the new elected government came in, they started investigating what had gone on in the construction of the park. Where had all the money gone? Who had gotten rich off of this operation? And there were plenty of scandals to be found.
The corruption allegations didn't seem to affect business. In 1985, there were over 1 million visitors.
But something happened here that was heartbreaking and helped lead to the ultimate demise of this particular dream.
One of the most ambitious rides became a symbol of what was to come.
Vertigorama. Era la montaña más grande del parque, digamos. Superaba 5 o 6 veces a cualquiera que existiese. Nunca había visto algo tan grande. Bueno, no se pudo abrir y eso fue la gran frustración, porque siempre faltó algo. Decían que faltaba una computadora.
As attendance and revenue fell throughout the 1980s and 90s, the rides that had opened began to suffer.
It was hard to keep all these high-tech rides maintained. They didn't have the investment money.
By the early 2000s, the park was struggling to survive. It would soon be struck by a fatal tragedy.
Caminando por acá, recuerdo el huracán, que es un juego que la verdad que nos marcó a todos como empleados, como compañeros, como amigos. De que acá estaba el tablero del control, veo las marcas de donde iban las rejas, donde cayó este muchacho.
On the 18th of February 2001, a 21-year-old park worker called Hernan Fischetti was testing Hurricane.
When it was right at the very top, Hernan was thrown from the car and smashed into the security fences below. He later died of his injuries in hospital.
In the wake of Hernan's death, Interama entered a terminal decline.
In 2003, a judge ordered an inspection of the 58 remaining rides and found that 12 of them needed to be shut down immediately due to safety concerns.
That led to a kind of downward spiral where it became hard to maintain the rides. That led to greater fall-offs in attendance. The money just wasn't there to keep it operating.
After a failed attempt to reopen the park in 2007, the rides that weren't ripped out were left to decay.
Un dolor porque uno cuando ve que, digamos, donde pasó muchos años, se va desarmando, algunas se fueron vendiendo, otras se fueron cortando y desarmando y vendiéndose por... Creo que he pasado por un montón de trabajos. Este es el mejor y creo que es el que nunca me voy a olvidar.
On the rugged eastern coast of Scotland, near the town of Macduff, nature collides with the modern world.
We have these steep cliffs that plunge down right into the sea.
At first, this looks like a natural coastal inlet. As you get closer, you can see engineering at play here, structures built into the coast.
Parts of the infrastructure hint at an industrial purpose.
It's near the oil boom town of Aberdeen.
There are all these boarded up buildings with very simple Spartan interiors that have been stripped completely bare. And out of one wall comes a huge metal pipe that plunges directly into the water.
This is clearly a complex of pools exploiting the geography and harnessing the wild North Sea.
To what end is initially unclear, but the distinctive geography here has provided multiple uses and ensured the life of this facility has taken some surprising turns.
It's like a natural amphitheater was there, and we've built something right at the center where the stage would be.
That stage would eventually play host to global stars, showing off some of Scotland's finest performers.
It's hard to believe how much it decayed.
Pat Wayne is part of an organisation determined to bring this place back to its former glory. She fondly recalls this site teeming with people.
All the local kids came down here. It was where they had their fun. It was a focal point. You had to fight for your blanket to go down in your spot, sort of thing. So all that would have been covered with people.
This is the Tarlair swimming pool, a public health facility born out of the ashes of a great trauma.
The First World War had had a traumatic effect on the health of the nation, not just with a number of soldiers returning from the front injured both physically and psychologically, but also with some of the negative results of the recruitment policies, which revealed just how unhealthy the lifestyle of many average Britons was at the time.
Exacerbated by the Spanish flu that swept the country, 1918 went down in history as the first year in which recorded deaths outnumbered recorded births. Public health was now in sharp focus, and interest was heightened further when voting rights were extended and the electorate tripled.
In the 1920s and 30s, the government massively increased the provision of health facilities in the UK.
And if everybody is a voter, then we want everybody to feel like they're being looked after by the government.
This led to the construction of more than 300 lidos and outdoor pools.
Local councillor John Hurd sensed an opportunity to be part of that drive and transform Macduff from a small herring port into a booming tourist resort. In 1929, he proposed plans for a pool. Despite global economic meltdown triggered by the Wall Street crash, Hurd's vision weathered the storm.
At first, there is the idea that government needs to stop spending. It takes a little while for people to figure out during the Depression that public works are a good way to use public money to keep people working.
With local unemployed men drafted in, construction was complete by 1932. On the 22nd of July, 3,000 people flocked to the coast of the Moray Firth to celebrate its opening.
So the Tarlair opening gala, that was the place to be. And it became known as the Mecca of Moray.
Its contemporary design, with the symmetrical T pavilion at its heart, tapped into a vision of progress and luxury.
The clean white lines of the Art Deco structure really contrast with the rugged rocks of the Aberdeenshire coast.
The Art Deco style was very popular for lidos and other swimming facilities at the time. They evoked the glamour of New York, Hollywood, or the French Riviera.
John Hurd and the town council were praised in the press for an outstanding piece of public enterprise. Its unique engineering and rugged construction provided the local community with a facility that would stand the test of time.
All of this is going to be filled and filtered and cleaned by Mother Nature. We are using the power of the sea to bring fresh seawater into the pools.
For many years, the pools were a huge success. Pat recalls the fun-filled atmosphere when thousands enjoyed the array of facilities and events on offer.
It was the community, really. Like, on a nice day, in my memory, it was always a nice day. Over there, beside where the picnic benches are, was the play park. And there was a set of old-fashioned swings. This area in the middle, between the boating pool and the big pool, had lines of benches. And you can see in the old photographs, they're just packed. Every seat is taken.
But the times were changing, and technological advances began to impact Tarlair.
Gradually, outdoor pools became less attractive compared with indoor heated facilities.
Cheap airlines start to fly. It's easier to get onto a ferry with your own new private car and travel on the continent of Europe.
With travel becoming easier and cheaper, there's always the chance of a nice beach in the sun.
The complex entered a period of decline. Numbers plummeted. Just 80 people turned out for the annual opening gala in 1975. Then, council funds for maintenance were pulled.
Something huge was needed to save Tarlair, and it arrived in the shape of a helicopter.
Tarlair's dramatic setting gave its owners an idea for a radically different use.
We've got a place here where natural geography makes performance better. And that means that we can put people on a stage in this beautiful spot and have their voices heard by hundreds, by thousands.
The pools became the venue for an annual music festival. The most iconic of these would be remembered in Tarlair for years to come.
In 1994, the venue hosted a sellout crowd of 5,000. Playing were two of the country's biggest bands at the time. These two bands were Scotland's own Runrig and Wet Wet Wet. Wet 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 were in the midst of their monster run at the top of the charts with Love Is All Around.
The festival began with Runrig headlining a wet and windy day.
They came in on a helicopter from the golf course at the top there. I was down here in the middle of the boating pool.
But there was a period of panic when some of the staff hadn't fully comprehended the nature of these swimming pools.
The water started to come in where there was a bridge here between the two pools, and the people with their big 1 metre long brushes trying to brush back the North Sea until they realised it was a lost cause.
Despite the concert proving a great success, occasional music events were papering over the cracks. By 1995, the pools were abandoned. Come 2012, a new fight was beginning for the future of this complex, and it continues today. Pat is at the forefront of a new vision.
Our passion is to bring this back to the community again and relive the memories and give the youth of today the opportunity to have the kind of memories that we had. My idea would be to have climbing towers, high bridges with a zip line going into the big cool pool, a sort of zip and dip, just to sort of finalise the whole thing. "16 miles outside Helsinki, the urban sprawl gives way to the natural world.
When you think of Finland in the summer, you think of wild land, lakes that outnumber people.
You think of trees, this very rustic life, being very in touch with nature.
Hidden amongst the dense pine forests are remains of an unusual complex.
It's a collection of almost random buildings.
There's a fabulous little tree house, some very odd, whimsical constructions, maybe almost something like a hobbit might build, or elves, or some woodland creature.
Having endured brutality, loss, and trauma, the man who created it retreated into the wild to build a new way of living.
The message here is, I don't need a lot to live a happy life, but what I want has to be fun, it has to be playful.
It's a sanctuary he borrowed from the world and returned to the world.
When I came here 25 years ago, I felt that he was like a lunatic, you know, a village lunatic or something like that.
Jens Gellin lives next door and has many memories of his unusual neighbor.
This was the main house where he was living. This was the main door, and there where he slept over. Finnish weather could have 30 degrees Celsius minus, and still he survived.
At first, there seems to be little order here, but there is method in the madness.
He had a very different idea of what a living space is like. You're not going to see a fitted kitchen here.
It's sufficient. You don't need anything more than this place here to make your food.
Who are we to say that there is only one vision of living and how one should organize living space?
This is Villa Mehu, dreamt up and hand-built by Ellis Sinisto.
Sinisto's background was unusual, to say the least.
He wasn't born in poverty, but soon was thrust into poverty when his family lost their home due to his father's gambling habit. As a young man, Sinisto wound up as kind of a vagabond, a drifter, without any steady source of income or any real place to call home.
He was marked by national as well as personal trauma.
In the early years of World War II, the Soviet Union launched a massive invasion of Finland, known as the Winter War, and Sinisto was drafted into the army.
Sinisto's devotion to pacifism was so intense, he refused to shoot the enemy even when they were invading his homeland.
And as a result, he was thrown in jail.
Then he ends up in a psychiatric unit where he acts up rather than go back to the prison camp.
After the war, Sinisto settled down in a small town outside Helsinki.
He staked out a little bit of land that he wanted to make his own, and he didn't have any money to pay for it, so he worked out an arrangement with the owner where he would do various jobs, and over time, in his payment, he would take little bits of land.
By 1954, he began to build Villa Mehu out of anything he could scavenge or recycle.
He worked by day, but by night he came back to his plot and built his structures.
He would add on a building here, a lean-to there, a quirky tree house. Over time, building up this little community.
You have a homestead, you have a house, you have everything here.
But what he built was more than just a home. It was an expression of something that would resonate far beyond this woodland sanctuary.
He took his friends or strangers, whomever came inside here, and had a good time. If we go further here, we have then sort of a hotel, because he could accommodate here more, 15 people and so.
For a man who seemed like he just wanted to get off in the woods and tinker with things, Sinisto had a huge network of friends and associates, and his home became a kind of a magnet, a place of pilgrimage.
Ellis and his constructions would become emblematic of a Finnish folk art movement called ITE, or self-made life.
IT artists are self-taught. They don't look to the standard artistic world for their models.
These were artists who were less focused on making permanent forms of art and getting commercial gain from that than in living in an artistic way.
Ellis was both the artist and the art.
I have to give an example of how to live in a different way, and to combine the nature, recycling, doing food, what you can get from the nature, and how you are with friends together.
The curious structures became a gathering place, drawing acolytes from across the country.
Yeah, this is important. It's walls, Romance walls, and here we have Ellis Sinisto and one of the most famous composers, Koczynski, done together.
Some of the biggest names in Finnish music, dance, and photography came here to spend time, to learn, and to experience the site.
Band member Mika Ajapalo remembers his own pilgrimage to meet the unconventional artist.
Did you ever witness his dance?
Yes,
Yeah.
2 times. Usually when there were more people than we.
Did he take his clothes off, or was he?
He was nearly always naked. Have a kitchen outside. He was there naked and when make food. So my wife remembers it always.
We're Finnish, it's normal.
Like many before him, Mika came to collaborate with and be inspired by Sinisto.
This was his house. He used to hang out in here. In the 50s and 60s, Ellis used to write songs, lyrics to songs. And when he met us, he gave us these lyrics.
Well into his 90s, Ellis and his unique creations provided a space for generations of artists to unlock their creativity.
One of his fans said he dared to cut the strings that tie us to modern life and society.
He always said his goal was that all those who visit me would leave happier than they had come. And he seems to have achieved that.
Last time I was here, it was in 2004 at Ellis's funeral. And in this pond, his ashes were scattered.
Even in death, Ellis Sinisto's philosophy lives on.
When he passed away in 2004, his friends and followers were left with a question of what to do with this quirky collection of buildings and artifacts that he had created.
Basically, they're built to fall apart. So how do you preserve something that's not really meant to be preserved? His followers see this site as a sanctuary that Sinisto borrowed from the world. He borrowed from it, and he's giving it back to the world.
Things pass on, lives come, and then nature then takes over, and time moves along, and nothing is here forever.